3, 2, go.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals, and this is the March 25th hearing of the board on the so-called Ice House application. And the purpose of the hearing this evening is to first hear from the testimony of peer reviewer Jeffrey S. Dirk, a licensed professional engineer from Vaness and Associates, and then to just hear from the parties and Mr. Suzinski as to where the parties are in the process of conferencing and how that's proceeding, so that we can schedule another meeting. Mr. Suzinski has indicated to me in an email earlier today that he would like to offer some evidence at a hearing to be scheduled next Thursday, which I believe is the 1st of April. So we can talk a little bit about that, but I think the best thing to do is to let me introduce the members of the board, and we'll see if we can get this hearing underway in a timely and reasonable fashion. With me this evening are board members Virginia Donahue King and Brian Conley. Also, Adam Brodsky, I'm told, is out there in virtual land representing the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Leonard.
Oh, good to see you again. Scott did a wonderful job for you during your absence.
Thank you.
So if you have nothing to say at the present time, why don't we proceed with the testimony of Mr. Dirk?
I just want to reflect on the record that Charlie Bosworth and Paul Driscoll, managers of the applicant, are here together with Corinne Tobias, our traffic engineer from Green International. Thank you, sir.
Okay, great. And that's helpful because I just have such a limited screen. I see 3 or 4 people, and there could be 50 people out there. So that's very, very helpful. Thank them for coming. Mr. Dirk, are you all set to rock and roll?
I am, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, great. Let me ask you a few preliminary questions, as I do most of the peer reviewers. Take 4 or 5 minutes. Everyone knows, professionally, everyone knows who you are, but there are a lot of interested citizens and other folks who don't know your training background and experience as a traffic engineer. And I think it's always best to highlight that information so that your testimony is in context.
Absolutely.
Hi, Mr. Bosworth. How are you? We saw you peeking in there. So, Mr. Dirk, why don't you tell us what's your position at Vanessa and Associates?
Absolutely. So, for the record, my name is Jeffrey Dirk. I'm the managing partner at Vanessa and Associates.
Okay. And how many years experience do you have in the field of traffic engineering?
I've been practicing in the fields of traffic engineering and transportation planning for 30 years.
Okay. And have you qualified in the courts of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to testify as an expert witness on issues of traffic engineering?
I have, Mr. Chairman, both in land court as well as Superior Court.
And how many times has that occasion arisen?
Over 5 times.
Okay. And you are a registered professional engineer?
I am, Mr. Chairman.
And for how long have you held that designation?
Since 1994.
Great. In how many states do you hold the designation of registered professional engineer?
All of the New England states and the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Okay, great. You list as part of your resume professional designation PTOE. Could you briefly tell us what that is?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The designation is Professional Traffic Operations Engineer. That is a specialty certification above and beyond the professional engineer's license that certifies that I am a specialist and trained in preparing transportation impacts assessments, safety assessments, and traffic engineering in general.
And how long have you possessed that designation?
Since 2000.
Okay.
I was actually in the group of probably the first 1,000 issuance of the certification, and now they're up to 3,000 to 4,000 certified individuals.
Well, congratulations. What you have the designation also FITE. Would you briefly explain what that designation means?
Yes, that stands for Fellow of the Institute of Transportation Engineers. That designation indicates that I've been recognized by my peers as having been practicing in the field for a significant amount of time and have been in charge of substantial projects, those that affect public health, safety, and welfare, and recognized as such.
And when did you first receive that designation? Approximately.
Approximately about 2005.
Okay, so you've had that for 15 or 16 years, is that
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Do you have experience performing peer reviews?
Yes, I actually serve as the traffic engineer of record for a number of municipalities in the Commonwealth, both on-call services as well as project specific.
For how long have you been performing peer review services?
Probably for well over 20 to 25 years.
Can you reasonably guesstimate the number of peer reviews that you have performed as a traffic engineer?
I would say that it's at least 1 to 2 a month that I do over the course of my career in that time span. It's a significant portion of the work that I do.
Okay. Now, you prepared a peer review in this particular case, did you not?
I did, Mr. Chairman.
And is that the review dated March 5, 2021?
It is, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, great. That's been published on the website. I'm sure all the attorneys and interested people have read it. So why don't I ask you, Mr. Dirk, why don't you tell us about your peer review, what you did, what you concluded, what additional work you thought was necessary. And the only thing I'd ask you to do, since traffic engineering is detailed in specific work, that you try to give your presentation in layman's language as much as possible, so that you don't leave the board or interested persons filled with a lot of technical statistics that we can never remember and will never understand.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again.
As a preamble, the floor is yours.
Yeah. So we undertook a review of the materials that were submitted by the applicant, and specifically looking at the original application that the applicant had made, just to get an understanding of the project and the various iterations that the applicant went through in understanding the property, and then their approach to designing the building itself, and primarily focused on circulation and building layout within the property. A more detailed analysis is undertaken of the applicant's traffic information, of the traffic study that was submitted for the project. There were 2 documents that we had reviewed. The first was the August 2020 traffic impact and access study that was prepared by Green International Affiliates. That was supplemented by a memorandum, a technical memorandum that was dated in November of 2020 by way of a follow-up to some traffic counts and adjustments of data that was a part of the original August traffic study. So we reviewed those 2 documents relative to traffic and transportation. We also undertook a review of the site plans for the project as well that were prepared and included as a part of the application. Specifically, as we're reviewing the site plans, we're looking at parking layout, circulation within the site, and then access to the property. And we're looking at those various components as they relate to basically access, safety, and circulation within the site. So that's kind of the context of how we review the site plans itself. So focusing on the traffic study first, or the 2 transportation studies that were submitted for the project. The first thing that we undertake as a part of our review is to ensure that the documents were prepared in accordance with all accepted traffic engineering and transportation standards. And those standards are published by the Massachusetts Department of Transportation first. They have guidelines that are published for transportation impact assessments that are conducted within the Commonwealth. So that's the first document that we look at. And that spells out the procedures and the standard of care that we as transportation professionals need to apply as we're conducting these transportation assessments for the project. The second is the applicable standards from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. They also provide guidance for transportation professionals conducting traffic studies. So we look at those two things relative to compliance with standards. And both of the documents that the applicant prepared did comply with those standards. So the documents that are presented to you follow those standards of care. So the basis of them is something that can be used from your standpoint in reviewing the project. And we've certified that as a part of our letter. One of the things that's unique to this COVID period that we're under, obviously, is that, you know, it's affected us all in terms of our daily lives and work environment. That also affects, obviously, traffic volumes and the way that people are using the transportation system. And so the Department of Transportation has also published guidance for traffic studies that are conducted during the pandemic because we are undertaking transportation analyses. That work does not stop. And so that's another document that we look at, that guidance that's provided, so that if we're looking at traffic counts that are conducted during the pandemic, there's an appropriate way to adjust the traffic volumes so that what we're looking at from a planning perspective is something that's close to pre-COVID numbers. So that if we start with some a pre-COVID number and then project forward to the future, what we're hoping for is that future condition. And that's what we're looking at in terms of planning for this project and other developments that may occur in the town, that the traffic numbers that we're forming those bases and opinions upon are as accurate as they can be given the situation that we're currently in. So we also undertook a review of those standards and how they relate to the information that was provided by the applicant. Just by way of a data point, we are, as the chair is very well aware, and I think a lot of the members of the board obviously are aware, the town has a number of comprehensive permit applications that are currently before the Zoning Board of Appeals. And we're undertaking reviews of those studies as well. And there's obviously an interrelationship between all of these projects and how they affect the town. I mentioned that because this application and the traffic study that was done for this project has an intersection in common with the project that is currently proposed along Canton Avenue. So that gave us another data point. So as we're looking at this applicant's traffic study and any traffic studies in particular in the same community, we want to be able to take a look at all of those projects and how they're impacting all of the roadways within the community itself cumulatively. And so we undertook a review of that in relation to this project, and this project in relation to those other projects as well. So starting with that as the initial comment on the information that was provided to you, the traffic study that was submitted for the Canton Avenue project, as I mentioned, it did have an intersection in common with this project, and that intersection was the Canton Avenue Blue Hills Parkway intersection. So both traffic studies studied that same intersection. The traffic study for the Canton Avenue project, they were fortunate enough to have collected their traffic volumes pre-COVID. So the traffic counts that they had performed at that intersection were not impacted in any way by the situation that is currently going on there. So we did take a look at those volumes in comparison to the volumes that the applicant's traffic study had used. And the applicant did undertake an adjustment to try to reflect the fact that they did collect their traffic counts during COVID. And so they did provide some adjustment to those numbers. However, if we looked at the pre-COVID numbers from that Canton Avenue study, compared them to the adjusted numbers at that same intersection as a part of the August and then November updated study, there were significant differences in the volumes, and significant on the order of 300 to 400 vehicle difference, meaning that the numbers that were used for the Blue Hill Avenue project were lower than the numbers that were used for the Canton Avenue project by about that magnitude, 300 to 400 vehicles going through that intersection. So we obviously, as I mentioned at the beginning, we needed to start with good data in order to assess the impacts of the project. If we don't start with good data, then as we start going forward into the future, obviously the numbers start to get off more and more as we start to compound things. So the direction we've given the applicant is that they do need to revise their traffic study And what we've suggested to them is the basis of that revision should be the Canton Avenue traffic volume, the traffic volumes at the Canton Avenue Blue Hills Parkway intersection from the Canton Avenue 40B project. They should be using those volumes at that intersection, and then they can then use that as for an adjustment to adjust the rest of the traffic volumes at the other intersections along Blue Hills Parkway. So we've asked the applicant to go and revise their numbers and their analyses. That's going to affect everything. So they're going to need to essentially redo the traffic study. Now, what I want to kind of put a fine point on that about is this project, in terms of the amount of traffic it's going to generate, is about 20 to 30 peak hour trips. So what that means is it's one added vehicle every 2 to 3 minutes during the peak hours on the roadway. And the peak hours of the roadway for a residential project, it's when people are going to work in the morning, so an hour between 7 and 9, and then in the evening when you're coming home, so an hour between 4 and 6. That's when this project will produce, it'll produce about 20 peak hour trips in the morning and about 30 in the evening. So even that variation in the traffic volumes, we are not expecting that there's going to be any significant changes from the analysis that was provided as a part of those studies. I do expect there might be a little bit of an increase in queuing and delays at intersections, but I think you're not going to see a wholesale change in the applicant's findings of the traffic study. However, our records and your records need to make sure that we're using the correct data. So I can hypothesize and probably conclude to you that that's what's going to be the results of that. But we just need to kind of check that box. As I said, everything's got to be done in accordance with standards. I need to certify that and provide a letter to you saying when they submit these revised volumes that it meets all of those standards tests and it's accurate information to you. So we've asked the applicant to do that. So you'll see some new information. Again, I don't expect it's going to really change too much in terms of the findings of the traffic study, but we do need to have that updated. The other thing in terms of the traffic counts and their future conditions analysis. So one of the things that the applicants are required to do is they need to look at a planning horizon. So we want to make sure that as we're looking at the impacts of the project and if there's any improvements that are planned, that they not only function today, but they need to have some life to them, because we don't want to build it and then next year come around and say, okay, well now it's over capacity. And so those improvements really didn't have a lot of life to them. So the applicant is required to undertake an analysis that looks at a 7-year planning horizon. So in their case, they're looking at the year 2027. And they look at the 2027 condition, both with and without the project, to see if the project has an impact on those future traffic volume conditions. So again, what the intent of that is to allow the applicant to go through this process with the board to the extent that they are granted the special permit and they commence construction on the project site. It gives them about 2 years to get through permitting, build the project, and then actually have traffic realized and added to the roadway. And then you have 5 years of life beyond the date that the project gets open and traffic is realized. So that's the intent of that 7-year planning horizon as you look at projects. So in that 7-year planning horizon, there's 2 components that the applicant looks at. The first is just general growth. So if no other development happened in the town, but you just had traffic as a result of, or increased traffic as a result of, maybe there's a member of the household that doesn't currently drive, but within the next 7 years, they're going to get the license and drive, that adds a vehicle onto the roadway. There also may be development outside of the community that might take place that might add traffic going through the town of Milton. So they use what's known as a general traffic growth rate just to reflect those increases in traffic that would normally happen independent of any development projects in the area. So that's one component that the applicant includes. The other thing is future projects. So if there are other projects going on in the town that would add traffic to this area, you want to make sure that that's included, because that traffic is above and beyond what the general growth rate would be. So as I mentioned, we have that one intersection in common between the Canton Avenue project and this project. So the Canton Avenue project does send somewhere close to 30 to 40% of their traffic through the Canton Avenue Blue Hills Parkway intersection. So not only does the applicant need to start with their data at that intersection, the pre-COVID numbers, they also need to add the traffic from that project into that intersection. So their future condition does need to be revised to include the Canton Avenue project. The other project on Blue Hills Avenue does not result in increases in this area that would exceed the growth rate. It's far enough removed. So we haven't asked them to do that, but the Canton Avenue project does directly impact that intersection. So they'll need to include that in their future analysis. I think that was it relative to the traffic study. Again, it was, the study was done in a professional manner. It was well put together. So we don't have a lot of comments in terms of the mechanics of it. So you don't hear a lot of comments or don't see a lot of comments about the trip generation needing to be revised or something wrong with the capacity analysis or the way that they approach the project. So really what we're asking is just update the traffic volumes, revise the analysis, and report the findings and any changes that may have happened as a result of those updates. But there is no need to expand the study area. Again, 20 to 30 peak hour trips. The study area that they looked at, which is basically extending from Parkway Crescent, which is to the north of the site. That's one location where you'd reverse direction if you're coming from the south from the Parkway, down to Canton Avenue intersection. And then there's also a U-turn maneuver just to the south of the project site that they studied it as well. So it's three intersections. Once you get outside of that area, what you end up seeing is the traffic volumes of the project drop off to somewhere around 10 to 15 trips over the course of the hour. That would not show an impact in terms of increased delay or vehicle queuing on intersections. So the study area is sufficient. So really, again, all we're asking the applicant to do is update the traffic volumes and then revise their analysis. But the mechanical parts of the study were done appropriately, and we agree with the methodology that has been used. So that is an overview of our findings relative to the traffic study. I can stop here and answer any questions on that before I move into the site plan, or I can go right into the site plan.
No, why don't we take questions here on this aspect of it, and it'll save confusion in my view.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let me ask you this. Your letter report is dated March 5, 2021.
Yes.
Have the traffic engineers for the applicant been in communication to you or with you regarding your two requests?
Not as of yet, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Could you reasonably estimate the time that it should take a reasonably diligent traffic engineer to perform the type of analysis on the number of trips and on the planning horizon, which you've just mentioned, and revise their letter reports?
So it really is, it's an office exercise, so it doesn't require them to do any field work on it. So, and this is a big assumption, assuming that the applicant's traffic engineer had nothing else to do and just sat there and just did this, it's probably about a day's worth of work.
Okay. So what I'm interested in is if let's assume within the next week or 10 days or something, you get a revised report covering the information that you're seeking, would you then be issuing a revised traffic analysis here for the board and for the town?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And then would that analysis indicate whether a further evidentiary hearing on those traffic issues is warranted, or if you agreed with the revised report of the applicant's traffic engineers, would that be sufficient to then move this project forward?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So maybe then let me do this just to cover the bases. Let me ask my board members if they have any questions regarding your testimony on traffic. So Mrs. King, do you have any questions of Mr. Dirks on the traffic issues?
If you're muted.
Unmute, Jenny.
Sorry about that.
Do you have any questions of Mr. Dirks?
No, I nothing springs to mind. There's no big holes in what I'm hearing. So I thank you for your report, Mr. Dirk.
Thank you.
Mr. Brian Connolly, do you have any questions of Mr. Dirk?
Yeah, just quick, Mr. Dirk, good to see you.
So the updates you're asking for are just for better data and a more accurate report. I think you're not predicting that the changes are going to have any sort of downgrade in level of service from what was predicted in the reports that were originally filed. This is just to kind of be more accurate and more precise.
That's correct.
Yeah. And the levels of service impact from the project, did you have, based on the current assumptions are reasonable, would you say?
I do, yes. I mean, given the volume of traffic that they're talking about producing over the course of an hour, I do. I mean, it's not going to really result in any appreciable changes in those letter grades.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Great. Let me ask thank you, Brian. Let me ask Mr. Brodsky, do you have any questions of Mr. Dirk at this time?
No, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Then let me just take one more step forward. Is there anybody else out there who's participating in this hearing who has any questions of Mr. Dirk?
There are no hands up.
On traffic issues. Okay, so there are no hands up. So with that, Mr. Dirk, thank you for your traffic analysis. What is the next part of your study to which you're going to testify?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next is my review of the site plans, and again, focused on circulation, access, circulation, and parking within the project site. So the comments relative to the site plans, again, are, they follow along with the traffic study, but there's a couple of pieces, again, as we focus on the site plan itself. The first thing is to make sure that access can be provided not only for the residents of the project, but also for life safety purposes. So fire trucks, ambulances that may need to get into the project site. The first step in demonstrating that type of circulation, fire trucks, moving vans, trash, refuse can all be accommodated within the project, is for the applicant to provide a vehicle turning analysis. So that was not as a part of the site plan set that we reviewed. So we've asked the applicant to submit that turning analysis, and we've defined the vehicles that we're looking for them to use, which would be the Milton Fire Department design vehicle. So the fire department should define the largest vehicle that they expect that may need to visit the site, and that should be the design vehicle that's used. And then a small box truck, and that you'll see in our letter. We define it, and again, the technical term, Mr. Chairman, is an SU-30, but what that stands for, it's a single unit truck that's 30 feet long, measured between the front axle and the back axle. So a 30-foot box truck would be something that's representative of a typical U-Haul type moving van that might be on the site. As well as a small trash truck. I mean, this is not a large project, so we don't expect there's going to be a very large trash vehicle coming here. Most of the time, it's rollout containers and things like that. So a 30-foot box truck is generally representative of a type of vehicle that would be there as well to accommodate trash and recycling. So we've asked the applicant to provide that analysis just to demonstrate that the vehicles can get into the site. So turn into the driveway, get to where they need to be in the site. So wherever the trash is going to get picked up, or for a fire truck, we want them to be able to maneuver where the fire department essentially wants them to be within the site to be able to fight a fire, and then get out from the site as well. So entering and then exiting. One of the things that this site plan has on it is they have provided accommodations for a 360-degree circulation around the building, which is a good thing. We don't often get to see that on the site plans. So the applicant has the primary access to the project on the north side of the property. And then on the south side of the property is an emergency vehicle access that allows for the circulation around the building. So the fire truck could, if it uses the south access, it can come into the property. I believe there's grasscrete or stabilized surface that they're providing that goes around the building, and then that connects into the driveway to be able to get out the primary access. So the turning analysis we've said should show that the vehicle can make the maneuvers along the fire department access to the extent that the fire department wants to circumnavigate the building. But I think what's also important is that the site plans have some type of a device to be able to restrict general traffic from using that access. because that access does get narrow. And we do not want errant vehicles to be able to use that access, nor does the applicant. The applicant has no intent on it being used that way. So we just want to see, whether there's going to be a gate or some other type of treatment to be able to preclude use of that emergency access. Other comments on the site plan, we've suggested that the applicant provide a sidewalk within the site to link the building to the existing sidewalk along Blue Hills Parkway. Again, to the extent that people want to walk or bicycle, because there are bicycle accommodations out there, being able to link those modes into the project site is important. So just something to be added to the site plan as well. And then along those lines, we did not have the benefit of the architectural plans, but a couple things on that that we've asked to be provided. The first is we need to see the garage plans so we can see what circulation looks like within the parking garage. We didn't have the benefit of those plans. And then within the garage itself, there should be a bicycle storage room provided, and there may be. The applicant may have included that. We just don't have the plans to be able to verify that they have provided bicycle parking. They certainly should be able to do that, so I don't think that's going to be a problem, but we just want to be able to see that on a set of site plans. We did provide some recommendations, again, because we don't have the garage plans, just some minimum dimensions that we want to see within the parking garage. So anytime that you have 90-degree parking, so perpendicular parking, the aisle behind those parking spaces ideally should be 23 feet wide at least. That allows for vehicles to be able to maneuver getting into and out of those parking spaces, especially if you're pulling into a space and there's a car next to you. The 23 feet allows for you to be able to back straight out and then cut your wheel, back out a little bit more and make that exiting maneuver. If the aisle width is less than that, it doesn't mean that the parking doesn't work, but what it does mean is you need to pull out, go forward, back up again. And so what we're trying to do is minimize those type of maneuvers within the garage. And the 23 feet allows for those maneuvers to be minimized. We've also suggested that in the front parking area, so basically the site has parking beneath the building, and then there's a parking area within the front. There's a couple of areas where we've suggested that when you've got parking at the very end of the row and there's not the ability to be able to basically, as I described, come back out and then turn your wheel so that you can then make a maneuver to be able to exit. There's a couple of locations where that would be difficult because there's not any room to be able to turn your wheel and then back out and then make a maneuver. So we've asked the applicant to look to see if they can provide little cutout areas. And I think the site engineer will know what I'm talking about, just to see if there's some added room to add some maneuverability for vehicles to be able to back out of the spaces. That's not critical. And the site engineer, we've asked them just to look at that and see if they're able to do that. They may be able to because it looks like they do have enough room along the front of the property, but they'll be able to respond to that. And then the last two comments really have to do just some notes and details to be provided in the site plans. This section of Blue Hills Parkway where the site is located, it's relatively level and straight. So there aren't any site distances of impediments that occur in the area. But what we do want to have is on the site plans for the applicant, their engineer working with their traffic engineer to actually plot the site triangles on the plan. So actually draw what the areas where a driver exiting the site, if they look to the left or right and they're looking out, actually in this case, they'll just be looking to the left because it's a one-way section of the parkway. That's going to create a site triangle as it's known. And if they put that on the plan, that allows your zoning enforcement officer or the building inspector to make sure that nothing's placed in that area that prohibits sight lines. And we've asked them to actually put a note on the plan saying that within that area, nothing shall be placed that obstructs sight lines. And again, it's really just a matter of it's very easy then for the building inspector or zoning enforcement officer to go out there with that plan and say, okay, there's something there that's blocking sight lines, it needs to be removed. So just showing that on the plan just helps with that. And the last thing is a general note on the plan, just to indicate that all signs and pavement markings that are in the site, it needs to conform to both state and national standards. There's a lot of times when we see pavement markings or signs that are different from what you would see when you're driving out on the roadway. And that leads to some confusion because you expect kind of the signs and the markings to all look the same because you understand the rules of the road and what the markings and signs mean. And so there needs to be consistency. So it's just a general note to be added to the plan. And it's not to say that the things that are shown are not conforming, but it's just to have a note for the contractor to make sure that they are conforming. So those are my comments on the site plan. Again, similar to the traffic study, there's really nothing in there that would affect the layout of the building or anything like that, other than the truck turning analysis, which the applicant may have done. We just haven't seen it. But the rest of the comments are more mechanical in nature on the site plan. And really, it's just that turning analysis and the review of the parking garage layout that may need some tweaks to it. But again, we haven't seen the parking garage, so I don't want to presume that that's the case. So that concludes my review on the site plans. And I think, Mr. Chairman, similar to your comments on or questions on the traffic study, to the extent that the applicant addresses the comments on the site plan, my review would be relatively quick on that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Dirk. I feel better. Even I understood what you were saying.
Thank you.
Let me check with my fellow colleagues. Mrs. King, do you have any questions regarding this aspect of Mr. Dirk's testimony?
Let's see. No, I don't for this.
Okay, Mr. Brian Connolly, do you have any questions?
Yeah, and maybe a request as much as a question. So you wouldn't have the week after your report, Mr. Dirk, we received our peer review civil engineer, Sean Reardon at Tetra Tech, gave his civil engineering review. And there's a lot of overlap between sort of some of your thoughts on the site plan and his thoughts on the civil review, and I think probably some overlap with the peer review architect's review as well. And I think it would be good if we asked you to review their peer reviews, and we should probably ask our architectural and civil engineering peer review to review Jeff's summary, just so they can sort of speak with one voice to the applicant, right? Yeah. If we wouldn't want to give conflicting requests, and also it could really sort of emphasize the clarity on some points we have if we're all sort of aligned. I'm noticing, for example, that our civil engineering peer review noted it's a 22-foot drive aisle and is recommending 24 feet would be preferred, and just other items where I think professionals are pretty well aligned, and I'm hopeful it won't be controversial. But I think it'd be probably worthwhile for all three of you to sort of see each other's comments and then be sort of getting on the same page when you're talking to the applicant about what we think the right solutions are. Same topics they covered about emergency vehicle access and turning radius, and all good thoughts you've all flagged for the applicant.
Agreed. Yes. I mean, we don't want any confusion for the applicant either, and certainly don't want the site engineer to have three different sets of comments and say, "Tell me what to do, guys," because yeah. I completely agree.
But it was a really helpful review. Thank you. It's a good job.
Mr. Dirk, did you have Mr. Ballmer's architectural review and Mr. Reardon's site civil review?
I do not have those, but I'm sure Ms. Barrett can provide those to me.
Okay, that'd be great, and we'll request her to do that.
Happy to do it, Mr. Chair. It's fine.
Is that fine with you? Is that a good idea, Judy?
It's A-okay. I agree. Yes, it's fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. Let's ask Mr. Brodsky whether he has any questions with respect to the site issues. Do you have any questions of Mr. Dirk on site issues, Mr. Brodsky?
Mr. Leonard, I do not have any questions for Mr. Dirk. I do have one question for you, which is that we're well on our way to address many of these comments, but if we need to communicate with Mr. Dirk, may we have your permission to have the professionals communicate with one another, similar to what we did with our civil consultants?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you not only have the board's permission, the board would be enthusiastic for that type of interplay to happen and to simplify the process as best we can and come to prompt agreements on most of the issues. So we'd look forward to that happening.
Thank you, sir.
Let me just ask a question, generally speaking, to the public at large out there. I don't know whether there's anybody present who has any questions of Mr. Dirk on his analysis dealing with site issues. Beverly, is there anyone out there that you see that has a hand raised?
No one does, John.
Okay. I guess there were no further questions of Mr. Dirk by anybody. Let me just ask the general question. Is it all right if we thank Mr. Dirk for his time and let the process continue? I know of no other reason to maintain his presence in this particular section of the meeting. Is that fair to say? I guess it is. Nobody's objecting to it. Mr. Dirk, thank you very, very much. We appreciate your written report. Your analysis, your oral analysis is a godsend to at least me. And I think I understand clearly what you're saying in the information you're requesting. And the applicant has always been timely and willing to provide information that's requested by the peer reviewers and to hopefully have an agreement between everybody on traffic issues. So we look forward to that happening, and we look forward to making further progress on this case. So thanks, Mr. Dirk. We appreciate your written presentation and your oral presentation. It's been very, very helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to assist the board with this project.
Great.
Good night.
Good night. But let me just thank you very much. Now, Mr. Brodsky, let me just ask, we have, generally speaking, we have a hearing. We have no other further hearing scheduled as of the present time. I did receive a brief email from Mr. Straczynski on behalf of the town, indicating that he would like to have the opportunity to have several town personnel and board members testify in a hearing that would be scheduled next Thursday on April 1st at 7 o'clock for the purposes of making a brief presentation. So let me just ask, is Tim Straczynski present this evening?
I'm right here, Mr. Chair.
Oh, Tim, good. I'm glad to have you here. Why don't you briefly outline your request and we can deal with it here and now.
So I have maybe a modification of that request. In the intervening period between our email conversation and today, I did check in with my fellow department heads who have been reviewing the peer review reports. I think, the opportunity to testify would really be if they had any additional comments to kind of supplement their original analysis of the application based on the peer reviews. And what I'm hearing from them is basically that they agree with the peer review reports, essentially. And so if that's going to be the sort of the guiding star for the board, that's something that our department heads, particularly police, fire, and public works, are fine with that. So I actually don't think that there'll be additional oral testimony that's needed based on the peer review reports. What I will say is that the town has submitted comments based on analysis of the original application. Those are in the town comments folder on the website. And so I would hope that the applicant would read those, and a lot of those comments are either requests for information or quite frankly things that the peer review analysis has already brought up. Particularly on transportation issues, there were a few things that I wanted to make sure I called to the attention of the applicant that are in the town comments, including, and they don't have to answer right now, but we would like to see some type of a response. In terms of a school bus pickup and drop off, including, pedestrian safety for students that are crossing Blue Hills Parkway to get to the high school. There are some requests and some recommendations on bicycle parking. So there's a lot of comments in those written comments that we hope the applicant is taking a look at. So I guess what I'll say is that I don't think there's any additional testimony that's needed. What I will ask you and your colleagues is if it would be helpful for them to have access to the department heads if they have any questions. That would really, I think, be the only need for a hearing next week and their presence at it. So that's just a question I have for the board.
Okay, I don't. First of all, thank you for the clarification. It's very helpful, and it's clear that any time any town board official or member, and particularly through you, Tim, who wants to comment on any aspect of this pending application, the Board of Appeals welcomes that and will consider it. Let me just ask Judy Barrett. Judy, can I ask you a question? And that's whether the information that's been submitted by the town, which I actually looked at this afternoon, because it's on the town website, right, whether that information has either been submitted to the peer reviewers, or at least they have knowledge that it exists and have access to it.
The peer reviewers have been informed that the board has a website with all the information on these applications. And as I've received things, I've forwarded it to them. I think that what they're going to want, and I'm imagining the town staff will want, is some organized response from the applicant, however you guys want to submit this, but just an organized response to, site civil 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What is the response? Architectural 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And similarly with the town staff. And if some of those comments are the same, then I think you could just say, see comments on Tetra Tech's peer review. And you don't have to duplicate the effort. But, I think at this point, what people are really looking for is the additional information that the peer reviewers and perhaps even the town staff need to be able to sign off and say, okay, our questions and concerns have been addressed. But yeah, they're aware of what's on the website, Mr. Chair.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Judy. Mr. Brodsky, do you want to address in a general sense whether since Mr. Boehmer's testimony, I think I called him Dr. Boehmer last time. I'm not sure that's technically right, but he probably liked it and he should. He was a great witness. Mr. Boehmer's testimony and Mr. Reardon's testimony, has there been any interaction, generally speaking, since their testimony in any meetings scheduled or Zoom meetings or other communications?
Mr. Leonard, I believe that there have been direct communications. There was a coordinated site visit, I believe, after the testimony of both gentlemen. I may have the dates off, but we are in direct contact and we'll continue that effort. I do want to note that, just to be clear, that Green International will be dealing with essentially our off-site traffic issues, but that on-site traffic will be addressed by Mike Joyce from Joyce Engineering, who's working with Mr. Reardon on that. So I just want to, if I have that correctly, and Mr. Bosworth will correct me if I'm mistaken, we've sort of divided those pieces up, and we just want to make sure that that's appropriate and consistent with the board's wishes.
Yeah, absolutely. Whatever the applicant believes is the cleanest and fastest way to get to these issues is you'll find will be fine with the board. In terms of what Judy Barrett was suggesting, using your prophet's hat, I guess, are you able to project a period of time within which the various peer reviewers and your development experts have had a chance to talk and discuss issues, come to agreements and all of that, when you'd be in a position to provide some type of summary on a project, process by process for the board, so we'd see where we're going on this and when we can start to either scheduling hearings or reaching agreements or whatever we're doing. Just a rough timeline. I don't have the slightest idea. If we're not going to have a hearing on April 1st, which I think that's probably true. I appreciate Tim's comments. the following Thursday, which I believe is April 8th, the board is going to be starting hearings on the East Milton Square project. At least evidentiary hearings. So if we weren't going to meet for the next 2 or 3 weeks on this application, would fill those dates with East Milton Square. So we want to give you whatever time you need to address the issues in a reasonable and fair way, and yet not waste valuable board time, because we are somewhat limited in our time on the East Milton application, which we expect to run from multiple hearings.
Mr. Leonard, we should be prepared to present final design plans and final answers to questions within 3 weeks.
Okay, all right. So,
Mr. Chairman, can I ask
please.
so Mr. Barassi, you will have revised plans to present to our peer review team, or you will have completed your process with the peer review team so that you'll be delivering something to the board that reflects their comments? I guess because I think the way I've been thinking about it, and let me know if this is not the way the team is that there's some information sharing and plan updates and reports that the peer review team is going to review with your engineering and design teams. And that, after some, back and forth and discussion, that would lead to sort of a revised set of plans that hopefully reflects some consensus, and that's what comes back to the board? Or is it more iterative with back to the board, then back to the drawing board and back to the board? I kind of just want to understand, when how many steps we're taking and how we see that going.
We should complete the entire process within 3 weeks. We've already been working on that. And provided the goalposts don't move, we believe that we can get that all done so that your peer review consultants, depending upon their schedules, will hopefully have signed off on it, and we can present you with the final project designs within that period of time.
Mr. Chair, if I could, sorry, Brian.
No, please go ahead.
I just wanted to do a little reality check on the peer review consultant schedules, because I was just communicating with them today about one of the other projects for which there's also some time sensitivity. And I can just tell you, unless it's a miracle, Attorney Brodsky, this isn't any reflection on you. I'm just concerned that 3 weeks may not be enough time for them. That's all. So I would say my recommendation is you keep doing what you're doing, because obviously you folks are communicating, which is in everybody's best interest. But don't be frustrated if the peer review consultants can't give you a complete response to any revisions and so forth you're making within the timeline you're talking about, because they may not be able to do it. Just wanted to do that reality check with everybody.
No, thank you, Ms. Barrett. Thank you for the reminder. Yet another reminder of reality. Again, we're going to be prepared. We understand that we are subject to other people's schedules. But I just want to give the board a reasonable time frame as to our piece of this, and we recognize that it may not be sufficient time for the peer review consultants to complete that.
Okay.
And I also guess to take up Mr. Connolly's point that the board also will need probably additional time in order to review all of the materials and try to understand it. So if we have April 1st, we're going to be off. Then if you've got the 8th, which will be East Milton. What if we scheduled another hearing on the, I'll call it Mr. Bosworth's application, 3 to 4 weeks after that, which would be about April 29th. So that would give us the 3 consecutive hearings on East Milton Square, and then pick up the Ice House application again on the 29th, and that can be we'll schedule it as a hearing, but if the parties aren't able or if not convenient, that can be a status report without having a full and complete hearing. Time-wise, does that make any sense? I think we have to have a definitive date to work towards. And I think Judy is introducing some realism to the process.
I think
Mr. Leonard.
that's a good idea, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, Attorney Brodsky, go ahead.
Oh, no. That makes perfect sense to us. We will be prepared.
Brian, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, we should have some schedule that our team's trying to meet and the applicant's trying to meet. And, you know, if things go the way everyone wants them to go, and maybe that we can come to that hearing with, you know, resolution on all of the comments and updates to all the reports. And if there are any, you know, points that are, you know, unable to be agreed upon, at least they can be presented to the board. But, you know, it could be that all the homework's been done and all the updates have been done in the best case. But I suppose I think we are better having a date on the calendar. So even if not everything is done, maybe the board would be able to narrow the focus of what's remaining, right, and kind of help move the question. So I think driving toward having, you know, all the revised plans, all the revised studies, and the peer review updated before the, you know, some brief period before the 29th, so that we could read the updates in advance. I think that'd be a good pace to try to move this ahead.
Yeah, I think so too. And Mr. Brodsky was talking in terms of 3 weeks.
Yeah.
What if we suggested that any materials that are in quote final form or any memorandum that's a status report of where everyone stands be delivered to the board on or before April 22nd, and then with a tentative hearing, or we'll call it a hearing, scheduled for April 29th, that would give the board a week to review the materials. And if indeed everyone needs more time and we need to move into May, we'll certainly accommodate everybody. This is not intended to unduly pressure anybody, but if you've got a time frame to work towards, I think it will be advantageous for the progress of the case. How does that sound to you, Mr. Brodsky?
It's a very good idea. It's perfectly acceptable. Thank you.
Okay. Ginny, do you have any comment on the scheduling here?
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I've got it written down for the 29th.
Okay, let me ask the boss, Miss Judy, do you think that makes a lot of sense, or do you have a suggestion that may be more meaningful?
I actually don't consider myself the boss, but thank you for that title. I think it's
I'll
fine.
get you a raise, Judy. That's what we're trying to do.
It sounds fine, Mr. Chair. It sounds very good.
Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to continue this Ice House application to Thursday, April 29th, 2021 at 7 p.m. With the understanding, and I think it's a better way to put it, that on or about April 22nd, the applicant will file with us any revised reports together with a status report as to where the parties stand on various issues, particularly any issues that remain outstanding between the parties. So we'll be in a position to address those issues on the 29th. Is that fine with you, Mr. Brodsky?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, great. Is there anything else that you need to discuss with the board on this application, Mr. Brodsky?
No, Mr. Leonard.
Okay, let me ask my colleagues, do you have any other planning or administrative questions that you want to pose at the present time?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't either, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, fine. Ms. Barrett, you don't have anything further to add?
Not this evening, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So with that being said, and
Mr. Chair, before you adjourn, can I chime in real quick?
of course you can. Welcome. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was unmuted earlier. My little guy was getting his evening bottle. I'm sorry about that. I just wanted to add real quick, the planning board is actually meeting as we speak to discuss the peer review reports that were presented the past few weeks. I have advised them that if they have any additional comments or testimony they want to provide, that it come in writing. So not being in that meeting right now, I don't know how it's going, but there may be some additional comments from the planning board, which the board will get, and we'll get to the applicant as soon as they come in, just to add to their consideration as they review everything else.
That's great. And if my suggestion would be also to include copies to the peer reviewers who are involved in those issues. That would be very, very helpful. We appreciate that. So with that being said, we're going to continue this hearing until April 29th, 2021 at 7 p.m. With the understanding that the applicant will submit a status report and any further engineering reports to the board on or before the close of business on April 22nd, 2021. And if those documents are really voluminous, I'd really request the applicant to submit, say, 4 copies to the Board of Appeals office, 1 for the board's file, and 3 which can be disseminated to the board members. Because if substantial copying is required, that'll just delay the board's process because we're not set up to do that type of copying in the regular course of business. Is that fair to you, Mr. Brodsky?
We're happy to do so, Mr. Leonard. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I want to thank everybody for appearing this evening and for cooperation. We look forward to a whole series of meetings between the peer reviewers and the applicant, and with the town's participation to the extent that it feels necessary. And I look forward to seeing you all on the 29th of April at 7 o'clock. So with all of that, the board's adjourned, and thank you for your participation this evening.
Thank
Good
you.
night, all.
Thank you,
Thank
Chairman.
you. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Going to bed, John.
Good for you. I hope we didn't keep you too long.
No, actually, it was only an hour.